21. The black dog was clearly not reliant on passing trade. Rodin had to ask for directions, and eventually found the bar hidden down a small alley. A sign hung over the door, showing what might have indeed been a black dog under all the grime. The door itself was covered in peeling paint, with a stain near the bottom that was most likely from repeated urinations. There were 2 windows, both frosted or possibly filthy, and glowing with a murky light. There was the sound of muffled music, bass, heavy, and as Rodin pushed the door he was unsurprised to be assaulted with the full force of the sound. The lights were near the windows, and most of the bar was in gloom. Shadows sat round tables hunched and hooded. They drank, played cards and talked in hushed voices. The glint of metal spoke of blades within easy reach. A thick fog hovered in the air as Rodin swam across the room. It was exactly what Rodin expected. He had walked north, leaving Dystopian's district, heading into the one controlled by a group who called themselves the Clan. There were rumors that they were all related. But they worked fairly well together, and the district was not as bad as some. Rodin had no problem subtly asking questions, which had led him to this place. Gal, the owner, might know something. Taking in the atmosphere, Rodin knew how to play this. He stepped up to the bar, resting one foot on the metal rail at its base and placing one hand on the sticky countertop. The man behind the bar, close-cropped hair and a vest top, chewing, ignored Rodin and kept talking to a couple of others at the far end. Rodin waited, counting slowly to 10. "You serving or what?" he had to shout over the music. The barman straightened, turning slowly with a hard stare which Rodin returned. With a shrug of his shoulders, the man ambled over. When he reached Rodin he stopped, both hands on the countertop. Rodin waited a few seconds, holding the man's eyes. "Beer." Treacle slow, the barman reached for a glass, pouring the drink, never taking his eyes from Rodin. Then he placed the drink down on the counter, liquid sloshing out.
10 bits.
That was an extortionate price, and no doubt far more than anyone else in the place paid. Rodin glanced down at the drink, noted the froth, then raised his eyes to the barman. "Get rid of the head and give me a full glass and we'll call it 6. The 2 men at the end of the bar were watching, and Rodin could feel eyes behind him. Nobody moved. The barman leaned in close enough for Rodin to hear his masticating over the thud of the music. He smiled, looked down at the drink for a moment, and his jaws stopped. His lips opened a fraction, enough for the build-up of phlegm to appear. He tilted his head, allowing the string of spit to grow, edging towards the glass. Rodin held the man's gaze. He knew this game. Then the grey spit was gone, sucked up. The barman moved back, taking the glass, pouring more beer. He even tilted the glass this time. He placed the drink down, but with slightly more care. None spilt, the small head nestling level with the top of the glass.
7.
Still overpriced, but Rodin slapped the coins on the bar, making sure they landed in a wet patch. Still watching the barman, he brought the drink up to his lips, took a mouthful, curled his lip and let out a derisory snort. The barman took the coins and walked back to the end of the bar, back to the 2 men. Rodin caught their eyes. They nodded, then turned, muttering to the barman as he placed the coins in the till, slamming it shut. Rodin drank quickly. He didn't like beer, and was always wary of the effect alcohol would have on him. He didn't like ceding control, his actions with Sporif still playing heavily on his mind. At least the coffee and food he'd had earlier would help him stay alert. Keeping his head tilted down to his drink, appearing lost in his own thoughts, he scanned the room. He noticed the group in the corner, 3 younger men, 2 women, laughing. He saw the old guy sitting on his own, 5 empty glasses on the table in front of him. He saw the tall man standing by the front door, arm resting on a ledge, his attention focused on the screen in his hands. Rodin continued drinking, taking in the layout of the room. The door by the side of the bar opened occasionally as patrons used it, access to the toilets, probably the rear of the building. A place for relief and deals. When a man with a limp headed that way, he looked towards the barman, giving a nod. No, he was nodding to the 2 men. One of them gave an acknowledging nod. Rodin knew the 3 of them would meet up at some point in the evening. The barman returned, motioning with his head to the already empty glass. Rodin nodded, and the man filled it once more.
Special deal for the second glass. 6 bits.
Rodin got the coins ready in his hand. You Gal?
Who's asking?
Some monosyllabic meathead down the road, thought you might be able to help me. A sound came from the barman's mouth, possibly a laugh.
Describes a lot of people. What you after?
Even though Rodin had been granted the opportunity to drink in the bar, he still knew Gal would be reticent. He needed more leverage. And nothing gave leverage like money. 2 things. First, somewhere to get my head down. Somewhere safe. A shrug.
Won't come cheap.
Rodin placed the coins for the drink in Gal's hand, then took a sip. If it's as overpriced as this crap, I guess I'll have to break into my savings.
We save the good stuff for people we like. Room's $450, an extra $100 for a regular check.
Again, it was way over the odds. But Rodin had to admire the extra charge. 100 bits to have someone walk outside the door a couple of times through the night. At least the money would keep them from entering the room. A bundle of notes appeared in Rodin's hand. Without looking, he knew how many there were, and he also knew nobody in the bar would have been quick enough to catch which pocket they came from. He had palmed them before Gal even started pouring the second drink. He held them up for Gal. 6 notes. The check had better be good. The notes disappeared into Gal's pocket.
Of course.
A pause.
You said 2 things.
Good, Rodin had his interest. I'm looking for someone. He might have passed this way. Pretty boy, blondie hair tied back. Probably looked a little sweaty. Rodin had noted the fashion for close-cropped hair in the bar. Anyone with longer hair would stand out. The sweaty comment would insinuate the person was nervous, as Ratch was sure to be. He was on the run, and would know he was being followed. Gal nodded over Rodin's shoulder.
Guy in the corner would probably take a shine to someone like that. Doubt he'd sit down after though.
Rodin turned briefly, although he knew exactly who Gal was talking about. So he's not been through. Gal hadn't answered yet. A shrug.
Maybe. Few days ago. What you after him for anyway?
Professional business. Gal stood back, his eyes traveling over Rodin. Rodin allowed his jacket to slide open as he shifted, letting Gal's eyes take in the handle of the blade he'd maneuvered earlier. Letting Gal reach the obvious conclusion.
I respect a man's profession.
As Rodin had expected, the presence of a mercenary in his bar didn't cause Gal any concern. But there would be little chance now of the room check becoming more intimate.
Yeah, he passed through. Heard he was heading further north. I think he had someone he was going to see.
His brow furrowed unconvincingly.
Can't recall his name. Sorry.
Another note appeared in Rodin's hand, only a 50, but that should be enough. I know a cure for memory loss. The note was gone from his hand in a flash, a smile now on Gal's face.
You do indeed. Sharoff. He's a controller, works round these parts. Used to be a big player, but the girls have pretty much abandoned him now.
What happened? Show interest, maybe learn something useful.
Couple of deals went sour.
He gave another shrug.
All I know.
Thanks. Rodin took another mouthful of his beer. The room.
Be ready at midnight. I'll show you then.
With a nod, Gal headed off to his pals at the end of the bar. Rodin finished his drink and left. Time to find out about this Sharoff. He talked and, more importantly, he listened. He dropped hints, leaving others to fill in the gaps. And he learnt. Sharoff had been well liked, especially by some of those who worked for him. He was fair, treating his girls and boys well, and made himself known to possible clients from a range of backgrounds with a wide range of tastes. He never forced any of his workers to take on a job they were uncomfortable with, but he had a large enough network that he could always lay his hands on someone for particular acts. But he had a fault: he was not strong enough. When one of his boys had been badly attacked, Sharoff had been too hesitant, and many of his workers drifted off to other controllers. Most of this information Rodin gleaned from one particular woman. He had to pay for her company, although he made it clear he was only after words. She had argued that her time was precious, and he had dug into his pockets. For what she was giving him, it was money well spent. She was past her prime, but he could see a good body beneath the signs of age and the attempt she had made to squeeze it into clothing that was far too tight. Her face, beneath the war paint, had clearly once been a draw, but now only the occasional flicker in her eyes or the briefest of honest smiles gave any kind of life. But she was a good talker, and in her business that could count for a great deal. Plied with money and drinks, she talked freely. Too freely at times. Did Rodin really need to know how Sharov's voice became squeaky as he approached orgasm? Even that told him something of the man, though. The way she spoke, it was clear that he cared for his workers just like Ratch. Rodin steered the conversation further in this direction. The woman said he was popular, but she remembered one particular friend. Someone with long blonde hair, who she was certain lived in a different district. She didn't have a name, but recalled Sharov referring to him as the Ratchet Man, or possibly Ratman. Rodin pumped her for more information, but it was becoming a struggle with the alcohol, and memories of Sharov were making her maudlin. She mentioned something about him heading north towards the edge. Buying her one more drink, Rodin left, making his way back to the Black Dog. So, two controllers both on the run, most likely together. And heading for one place they thought they'd be safe. But running would not help. The past always caught up. Those like Rodin would make sure of that. Even if that meant hunting down the innocent at the behest of those with needless grudges. As he wondered if the woman's downbeat mood had affected him, he reached the Black Dog and forced his way through the atmosphere inside. The place was crowded. It was a few minutes to midnight, and Rodin knew there would be noise well into the early hours. The music still blared, but the sounds of conversation had risen. A few hushed voices would be drowned out, but 100 took on their own life, an ever-present sibilant echo around the thudding beats. Rodin fought his way to the bar, waiting for Gal's attention. He had help now, a young woman who was clearly a favorite of the locals. They joked with her, Rodin catching some of the crude comments they threw her way. She volleyed each one, returning with enough venom to let them know they had no chance, but with enough of a smile to give them a glimmer of hope. Keep them eager. She was a good choice for a place like this, Rodin thought. Rodin was sure she could handle herself if things got physical too. As she poured drinks, he noticed how she held herself, her well-developed arms, the confident, graceful way she moved. A polar opposite to the woman who knew Sharov. Eventually Gal turned his way, beckoning for Rodin to follow. They headed through the door by the bar, and Rodin saw the toilets and an exit to the alley at the rear. Gal turned to a second door and pressed his palm to the screen beneath the faded sign that read Guests Only. Beyond was a brightly lit corridor and a flight of stairs. They went up 2 flights, then along another corridor, this one darker with thin strips of light at the top and bottom. Gal opened a door a few rooms down. Rodin's lodgings for the night. It was better than he expected. The bed looked comfortable, and there was an easy chair by the window. To one side was a simple bathroom, shower, toilet, sink, all looking freshly cleaned. In fact, everything looked clean. Gal must have read his expression.
If the room's a tip to start with, people tend to think they can do what they want with it. A bit of effort making the place look nice, and people are more likely to treat it well.
He smiled.
Makes it worth the money.
Rodin nodded in appreciation. Gal brought out a screen and took a palm reading. This would feed into the system, allowing Rodin access to his door and the door out into a back alley, if he really needed to wander around in the night. Then Gal left, telling Rodin to be out by 9 or he'd have to charge for another day. Rodin checked the room thoroughly. There was one eye hidden in the bathroom which Rodin left alone. Otherwise, he could see no security. Popping his head out into the corridor, he could make out an eye at either end. He took in other data. 4 rooms on this floor, 2 to the front of the building, 2 to the back. These were probably a similar number on the floor below. Above, he knew from the outside of the building, were attic rooms, possibly where Gal himself slept. The floorboards in the corridor had creaked, as did the door. That was good. Shutting the door, Rodin strained his ears. He could hear the muffled music from below, but not as loud as he had assumed. Fairly good soundproofing. It might mask the sounds of someone in the corridor. He checked the window. It was welded shut with toughened glass. The blind was thin, but this was not a problem. He liked to wake with natural light when he could. The door could be securely locked from inside, but he added a thin wire, setting up an additional layer of security. Force of habit. Satisfied, he started to bring himself down for the night. Keep the routine, he told himself. He stripped to shorts and ran through a few exercises to build up a sweat. Then he took a warm shower, letting the day run from his body. Next was the equipment check. He went over everything, turning out all his pockets, all the secret folds in his clothes. He scrutinized each tool in turn, ensuring nothing was remiss, placing each one back exactly where it should go. Then, placing his clothes where he could access them quickly in the morning, he eased himself between the sheets and turned off the light.